Hey, comics people. Welcome to another episode of Reviewing Comics with me, Alex Turbin. This week we're doing Tipper Gore Comics and Stories, number 2, which was produced by Revolutionary Comics in 1989. But before we get into that, I want to show you some of the stuff that helps support the channel. If you check this out at patreon.com under Alexander Turbin, I produce a full-size, full-color comic book every month for $2 each month for my patrons, and I also list it on my website at alexanderturbin.com, and I list these, and it has 3 rotating stories: Death Knight, Cyrene the Cleric, and Queller, and they're rotated out every 3 months and then collected into their own comics. Here's Cyrene the Cleric number 2, and so I also do other things like the Forlorn and Mutandis and stuff. So if you'd like to support the channel by doing that, I'd appreciate it. Also, if you like this content, please consider subscribing and hitting the like button and commenting and all that cool stuff that helps YouTube's other algorithm spread the word of promoting these kind of comics. I think I don't do power comics, although this could possibly be considered a power comic. I mostly think I'm going into the black and white glut, but I'll also be doing some other stuff, some more other indie comics too, as time goes by. So as I said, we're doing Tipper Gore Comics and Stories, and I don't really remember buying this. I kind of remember picking it up. It was one of those purchases where it was a slow comic books week, and or maybe I went into the comic shop one of the other days other than Wednesday and just was perusing, and it maybe was an impulse buy. Don't really remember reading it at the time, so it didn't really stick with me. But getting this it's really not my kind of thing. I'm not really into the horror stuff, and this really looks typical horror, like some kind of Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of thing, Friday the 13th, and that's really not what I'm into. But I think I saw Tipper Gore and I was like, well, she is the queen of censorship and I am the king of anti-censorship. It's really the basis for almost all of my political beliefs is anti-censorship, which kind of is odd because censorship is really known for being a liberal thing, or it was. It's kind of flip-flop nowadays, which is very unusual. Tipper Gore being the wife of ex-Vice President Al Gore, and I believe at the time he was a senator and not a vice president. But anyway, let's get into it. When I first got this, I wasn't impressed, didn't really think anything of it. I might have enjoyed the cover, might have thought the back cover was pretty cool, but when I perused through the inside, I know that I wasn't really into it because this really isn't kind of my thing, or it wasn't. But now this is one of my favorite comics of all time. The creators, the publisher rather, goes into a detail of what he wants from this comic and what he has in it. He also goes into detail of inviting other artists to join in this publication, and that he's going to try his best to get as many people in as he can, which I really love the love for the comic book artists that he's given. He also goes into detail about what he wants in the book. He wants it to be a horror anthology, but not to be like ghosts or spirits and werewolves and zombies and stuff like that. He says that's been done to death, and he rather would have life experiences in a horror vein. And I think that's a great way to go into it. The first story is kind of a weird little thing, done by I can't remember who it's done by, because, and it does really, artist by Mike Clift and the story by Todd Lauren. I think Todd Lauren is the actual the publisher of the book, but I might be wrong about that. The story is written really well. I love the writing of the story. The art for me is a little weak, and I'll just go by story by story. I believe there's 4 stories, but it's really about this weapon designer, this weapons creator who works for the government, and they're pressuring him to create this ultimate weapon that's going to wipe out the Russians, and they're really using it to they're really coercing him into doing things that he doesn't want to do. So he's making his weapon, and the writing is really awesome, and the dialogue is really awesome. It's very far fetched and out there and over the top, but dealing with this subject matter, it's perfect for it. Like, you've got the head guy, the head military commander, and he's really like, we want this weapon in 5 days. We want it in 5 days. If we don't have it in 5 days, the president says, I'm going to kill you, or whatever. He doesn't say that, but he might as well have. But he's very typical dictatorship, military. And this whole comic is very, if you were looking at it from the perspective of that time, I think it would be liberal leaning, but it could be any kind of conspiratorial thoughtfulness nowadays. Conspiracy theorists have really kind of flipped. It used to be kind of a lightweight, non-political, just kind of out there people, but it's kind of gone, I feel, into a dangerous territory. I love a conspiracy theory. I've always loved conspiracy theories. But some are just dangerous, and they shouldn't be promoted, I guess. Especially like the QAnon is just, it wouldn't be so bad if it was a niche thing and people just, disregarded it for the silliness that it is, like the flat earthers. I mean, they say there's flat earthers out there, but any reasonable person isn't going to think that's true. And, you just kind of think it's silly. But so many people take the QAnon seriously that it's a little sad and scary. But anyway, getting back to this, it's very conspiracy theory oriented, the whole comic, and it's anti-government, anti-establishment. In this first story, he's building his weapon. You don't really know what the weapon is. It's just kind of a, he just calls it a revolutionary weapon or something like that. And eventually he has a truck. So apparently he's a redneck who smoked pot. Maybe not. Anyway, don't really love the art, but I'll get into that in a second. So he goes through it. He creates one weapon, I guess, or the government creates a weapon, and the Iranians get it, and they melt the faces of a bunch of people in Europe. I guess, I don't know. I guess that's the thing. So he wants his weapon to not be like that, stolen or given to the Iranians, and so he's gonna try to get it back from the government. But this military guy says he knows about the weapon, and he's taking it, and he's going to use it. But the guy that creates the weapon instead shoots the government man in the head, and he's going to instead use it. And what happens is he shoots the weapon, and all over the world, anybody that wants to control or enslave people, or have their doctrines over other people, where they want to be a tyrant, a dictator, whatever, then they just melt and they die. So basically, if you have any kind of territorialness in your head, in your mind, in your heart, then you're going to melt. So he leaves this message all over the world saying that we have another chance to take the world back from the tyrants and the dictators, and that we're going to rule the world with our brains and our minds and our hearts instead of weapons and fear. Um, it's a great story. I like the writing. The art is a little sluggish for me. Um, it's a lot of stippling, a lot of headshots, a lot of talking heads. It's basically really just talking heads. So there's not a lot of action. There's not a lot of dynamism. Sorry. Um, he's got some cool headshots of melting people, but in he could have made this a little bit more dynamic, but he just chooses the talking heads, which makes it kind of a little bit boring. Um, and they're not different poses or angles. Um, the faces are and emotions are pretty good, but there's a couple of points in it also where I have to backtrack. Like it goes from here to here to here to here. But when I read it, I went from here to here to here. When I think it goes from here to here to here to here. So if you can't figure out which way you're supposed to read the text, and that's a failure on both the artist and the writer's job, I believe. Um, but story number two, and I know this video is going to be a little bit longer, but that's okay. Um, I didn't realize at the time, I didn't even know who he was, but there's two stories here by Ken Landgtaff, which is the artist for the New York Outlaws, um, and written by Todd Loren, who I guess again is the publisher. And this is kind of a simple story, but it kind of isn't. And it really here's the skulls in the mesh. That's really pretty cool. Um, it's this woman and her boyfriend, and they go to a carnival, and he wants to go on the roller coaster, and she keeps saying to him, what if something happens on this roller coaster? What if we go on the roller coaster and it falls off the tracks and we all die? And so the guy's like, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Stop being a pain in the ass. And she's like, what if we go onto um, this other carnival ride, and it goes through the tunnel, and all of our heads got lopped off? And he's like, oh, that's crazy, that couldn't happen. And so they go on to the carnival, and they're going on the ride, and instead a nuclear warhead hits the city. I believe that's what happens. I don't think this is by somebody else. I think these two panels are not by Ken Landgtaff, but the Ken Landgtaff art is really awesome and distinctive and really really great. It's super flowing. One of the great things about Landgraff's art is how flowing it is. It's very funny. It reminds me of the kid of the one of the people that died in the submarine. That the kid did not want to go into the submarine, and he did it for his dad, and then they of course died. So sometimes you have to listen to your heart and not do it. Here's another, the third story, art by PCS. I don't know. Oh, I don't know who that is. Again by Lauren, A. Lauren. He's the writer. I wish the word balloons were roundish. I really don't like this square. You don't know when people are thinking. I guess you got the dots, and then you got the tails, but I wish they were roundish. This one is very much like Brazil. During the whole thing, this guy, he's calling up he had a bill from his credit card company or something, and he's trying to pay the bill, but they're like, no, you can't do that. And then he just goes through all of this bureaucratic nonsense that pretty much everybody has to go through. I don't know if you've ever tried to register and insure your vehicle, but you have to do that in a very specific way. And if you don't, you have to go back to the other place. and it's a little bit of a pain in the ass. And really, everybody goes through these things, whether it's buying a house, getting insurance, registering a car, or whatever it is. There's bureaucracy in life, and that's what Brazil is kind of all about, the bureaucracy of of your life. And really, that song from Brazil was going through my head while I was reading this whole thing. Um, the art is a little gloomy-ish. Everybody kind of has the same look about them, and they're really kind of is, even though their expressions are kind of, he's trying to do them. Really, I just don't think he catches it. Um, so finally, I mean, the cops are after him, or they're saying that they're gonna come after him if he doesn't um, show up at a certain place at a certain time, and he can't. He keeps coming up into these roadblocks for trying to do the right thing. So he's a good guy. He's trying to do the right thing, and then he just snaps. I guess this is saying that he lost his sanity. Um, I would say this whole thing is the most Power Comics ish. With the wood paneling, wood grain is the only kind of texture you've got, and everything is very open. The negative space is very pronounced. Um, the directions of the backgrounds is very one sided. Yeah, so the design really isn't that great. Um, but so he kidnaps everybody that he's come across that has given him his bureaucratic runaround, and he just kind of mows them down with a gun. Um, so that's kind of a modern horror thing, where because there's so many mass shootings nowadays. I guess wouldn't be considered a mass shooting because he kidnaps everybody and brings them into a log cabin and then mows them down. So that's how it just kind of ends. And but it goes along with the whole anti-society, anti-corruption, anti everything. This book really is kind of crookedly printed, as you see, which mine are crooked sometimes. So there's that too. Here's the second Ken Landgtaff drawn episode. And it's funny how the creator of the book said that he didn't want any kind of ghosts or vampires or anything like that. But the second story is very typical ghost story, where the main character goes into a hotel, and the the woman there warns him that there's a ghost, and he sees her every night. The ghost comes back every night, and after 3 or 4 nights, he kind of gets enamored with the ghost and kind of falls in love with her because she's a beautiful visage. And he's got this whole sexy scene set up where he's going to try to, I don't know, have sex with the ghost. And he finally gets her there, and he beds her a little bit, and then she turns into a ghoul and kills him, I guess. So that's very typical EC kind of no twist kind of thing. But the art, again, the art is really good with Ken Landgtaff. The fourth story is really very anti-money, anti-monopoly, anti-power corruption. It's basically about this restaurant owner who things have started to not be so good for him financially. So he goes to get a loan, and so then he goes to the bank where he's trying to get a loan, and he's practically begging the banker to give him a loan, and the banker's like, no, 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 because originally he wants $1 million, and he's like $10,000, then he's like $2,000, please give me the loan. But the banker won't give him the loan, and he really almost takes pleasure in denying the loan to him. And then later on, the banker is reflecting on his day and how wonderful it was to make this guy squirm, and how he enjoyed making him beg for money and turn him down. This is where his whole diatribe on how wonderful it is to make Vincent try to get his money from him, and then he can't. But then he gives it to this other uh, this rich woman who used to be the wife of a dictator or something. Um, so then you days later or whatever, the same guy, the banker, is going to the restaurant, I guess, or going by the restaurant, something, and two vehicles smash into each other. And I think that's the bank's money. So the bank's money goes everywhere in the street, and two bags fall on Vincent's cutting board where he's prepping for the day. So he gets the money and is all happy. So that's really, even though this is about corruption and greed and corporate America, the ending is really unfulfilling because nothing happens to the banker, and he just kind of gets money by happenstance. Maybe if they had made him set this up and he knew what was going to happen or something like that, maybe that would have been better. The art in this is the weakest. It's very avant-garde, kind of art deco-y, and that's fine and good and all, but it shows no emotion. He shows no emotion here. He's just kind of you're supposed to feel the emotion from the directional lines. It takes you out of the story. You don't know who's what. It just, I don't know. He just shows women. I had to reread this a couple times because I didn't understand that the story was about the restaurant, and not about this girl here. I'm like, who's this girl? Is she Peter Vincent? That didn't make any sense. I know you want something in, the foreground, middle ground, background, but it just didn't really make a whole lot of sense as far as what was going on in the story. This is pretty good. It shows his bills and stuff that are due. But really, again, the speed lines to show emotion is really kind of, I don't know whether it's weak and lazy or he just didn't know how else to do it. But I really felt that was kind of took me out of it. The art really took me out of the story. I was not invested in the story because of the flow of the art and how I really couldn't gel with it. So there you go. Tipper Gore Comics and Stories. I really enjoyed reading it. It was really fun. I would give it, if not for the art in that last story and the middle story where it was about like Brazil, I would have given this a 9. But I think because of those two weak art in the story, I would have to give this maybe an 8. But saying that, I really enjoyed it, and I'm definitely going to get some more of these stories. If you like the content, please consider subscribing, and have a good one, and I'll see you next time.